Hi, just making it under the wire this weekend. Just before the Oscars, I finally watched the 10th and final nominee for Best Picture this year, Ryan Coogler's Sinners. Nearly a year after it came out, it didn't strike me at the time as being particularly interesting. And by the time it was receiving all the acclaim and it was made available, it never became available cheaply. And so I discovered that it's actually cheaper to buy the DVD and then sell it to a second-hand shop than it is to actually rent it digitally. So I did, and I watched it, and it's the story of twin brothers, Smoke and Stack, black former gangster types who grew up in Mississippi, made their name in Chicago, and have moved back to their hometown with the intention, set in the early 1930s, of opening a juke joint, a kind of prototype nightclub for black audiences. They go around the town accumulating their various resources, having bought up a derelict sawmill. But when they open it and everything seems to be going well, they've got a young prodigy musician playing who's their cousin, various girlfriends and musicians, and everyone playing to a great audience. Suddenly, the place comes under attack from an Irish vampire who has recruited two local farmers and who intends to bring the locals into the fold themselves. Um, it's it owes a lot to From Dusk Till Dawn to begin with, because it starts off as one thing and then halfway through it turns into a siege movie about vampires. But while that movie was just a modern day grindhouse picture, this is aiming for something much more complex, much deeper, and more thinking in detail about African American history and how America is built by people of color. Um, Pretty much all the white characters in the movie are villains, which is refreshing. The vast majority of characters are black. Um, there are some East Asian characters who I think from context one can assume that they're Chinese, although I think it's not explicitly stated. Um, and the film is about how it's the immigrants who've built this country. It's immigrants who have constructed the culture upon which this nation is built. It's the immigrants who are doing the hard work, who are running the stores, who are doing all the things that the rich white people won't do. Um, all of which is totally valid. Well, it's a totally valid statement. I agree with it absolutely unreservedly. But it's not terribly original. The way the film explores this idea is original. The idea of um, the mythical ability of someone whose musicianship is so extraordinary that he can almost um, materialize other times through music. So there's a sequence where he's playing, and around the joint, dancers and musicians of color from other times appear. So you've got rock guitarists, you've got break dancers, you've got ancient Chinese dancers, all these different art forms of different cultures that have found their way together at this one point in time. And we're seeing the past having built to this point and where the future goes from there. And it's a really interesting and original idea in terms of how it's been portrayed. The vampires also are they're white, they're assimilationists. They want to bring the black people into the fold, to make them like them with Irish music, culture of white European origin. And again, the way that's portrayed through assimilating into the culture, erasing the native culture and imposing white culture upon them, I think is portrayed in an interesting way. But the actual statement it's making, I don't think is particularly groundbreaking. I think it's also partly undone by, not going into spoilers, an ending sequence that seems to ignore that concept entirely, um, and feels not necessarily tacked on, but and not problematic in the way that the word has come to mean, you know, problematic, but just it doesn't fit in with how I feel the film was supposed to be read, and I can't see an alternative way of reading it. In terms of the production itself, it's generally very impressive. One problem was I was watching it on DVD on a less than optimal high definition television, so the cinematography and sound weren't coming out, I think, as well as they should. But the production design, costume design, makeup, and visual effects work were all absolutely top notch. Michael B. Jordan plays twins, and the effects work is seamless. It's flawless. You would think it's actually twins playing this character if you didn't know, or these characters if you didn't know, because you cannot see a join, you cannot see a line. It's all perfectly done. The makeup effects in the later part of the movie are absolutely brilliant and flawlessly achieved. The performances are generally very strong, but I felt the characters were lacking a great deal of dimension, lacking a great deal of contrast within themselves. They're often quite linear. Um, and it has a big ensemble, and there isn't much time to fully explore multiple sides of all these characters with what Coogler wants to do. But I felt that characters were a bit too straight line, regardless of how good the performances were. Michael B. Jordan, who I've never found to be that great an actor, I think is entirely perfectly adequate here. He's certainly servicing the material as well as he can. And I don't think another actor would be able to do better than him, because I just think the characterization isn't there. The supporting performances are generally strong. Wunmi Mosaku and Delroy Lindo have both been Oscar nominated. They're good, but again, there's just not enough depth and complexity to the characters. Um, but it's not a bad film. I agree with its ideas and the points it's trying to make and its aims, and it's trying to achieve those in an unusual way, in a way that's fresh and original and creative, and a way that has found great resonance with critics and massive resonance with audiences. I'm really startled that a film like this has been as successful as it is for a film that is so out of step with anything that a major studio would try and position as a big movie these days, and then goes off in a completely different direction halfway through. Um, I think it's very, very encouraging that a film like this has been as successful. That it's a film as, I mean, it, every time that the phrase go woke and go broke" is invoked, it is always shot down. This is one of the very best examples of shooting that down, because this is a movie about how America was built by slaves and by people who weren't white, and how white people are generally the villains of this story. And it's been a massive success. um, in particular, and with international audiences as well. But it's not as good as I think the hype says it is. I can't imagine Jordan winning Best Actor for his performance, really, because he's not giving as complex a performance in either of the two characters as some of the other nominees. I can't see it really winning any of the other major awards. Maybe screenplay, um, but I think other frontrunners are overtaking it. Having said all of that, I do think it's a good film. I do think it's worth your time. The fact that it's 2.25 hours doesn't really feel like a problem. It's sailed by. It's packed with incident. In plot terms, it's very strong in terms of just following the story and following these events. But in terms of the originality of its message and its complexity of its message, I don't think it's as masterful or groundbreaking as people say. And I've tended to find that with Coogler's films, that he is a very talented filmmaker, but the things he wants to say are not, I don't think, as earth-shattering as he seems to think they are. They seem to me to be either self-evident or common sense. He achieves them in a very interesting and dynamic and original way, but Sinners follows the pattern of his other work in It's good, but it's not amazing.